All right, guys, let's change gears a little bit. Jeff Evans has got a great philosophy, as I call it here at Jefferson, just like his dad. He'd rather, and this is, as you guys know, this is a hot topic. It's been like that for a while. But Jeff's philosophy is I'd rather lose with my own players than win with somebody else's. It's like you win or lose with the kids you grew up with in the program. Yep. But not every coach, as you guys all know, win that way. They recruit, there's recruiting going on, even in small and subtle ways. I am a believer, because I won here at Jefferson with Jefferson kids I grew up with. And frankly, it pisses me off that these coaches recruit and do that type of crap. And to me, I would have no problem at all if athletic directors or parents of communities that have these coaches would just fire them, get rid of them. Because, so what are your thoughts on that part of high school hoops in this state, of coaches that recruit, and Jeff's philosophy of winning with your kids and not doing that type of stuff to try to win?
I'm old school, so I'm in that category of, you live in that district, that school boundaries, that's where you go and that's where you stay. And
at the same time, we've all had guys move
transfer in, but
that were good players.
But we didn't recruit them.
Right.
Didn't recruit them. They moved in. Like when the Carlsons moved in from Grand Rapids, I didn't even know who they were. When their dad called and said, "When's your next open gym?" He said, "These guys must be pretty good. They're going to drive down from Grand Rapids for an open gym." But again, I'm not for the going out actively recruiting players. No.
In some schools now, it just recruits themselves. I mean, it's gotten to that point where, players, their dads usually get together, AAU season, hey, come to our school, you can have a dynasty, whatever. And so I think if you have an environment that kind of welcomes these transfers, it's kind of known. You don't even have to go say, hey, come here. But it's kind of now at this point, it's just kind of known that,
if you want to transfer, go here.
You can't tell me there's not some phone call that's made, though. There's got to be at some point, hey, would you want this guy? You think he'd play? And the coach can just say, yeah. Or the coach can say, no, we don't want him. So, I mean, I don't like it, but at the same time, there's open enrollment, and kids want to make choices, and they sometimes maybe think, like I had a guy who struggled playing for me. He was hard for me to coach, and he went to Hopkins, and he lost to Oxton's team in the state championship, and he played for Hopkins and played great. And actually, I was glad the kid left, and I had no ill will towards him moving, and he had some success, and that was good for him, because it felt like a breath of fresh air when the dude left, because he was trying to hold our team hostage, So sometimes, I mean, the open enrollment can work in your favor when kids actually leave who are kind of program record guys, and you don't have to just cut them. They can go find a different school that will take them. But I don't know. I got mixed emotions about it just because it's a law, open enrollment. You can go wherever you want for whatever reason. You want to go for a good music program, go there. And some schools actively recruit as a school. Like they send out flyers.
Most of those are private schools.
No,
right?
This is a public school. Minnetonka.
So.
Their whole philosophy is we want to be first class in everything, and you should want to come to our school. And Minnetonka won in basketball.
You must get calls, people coming in.
Too.
But the whole open enrollment part was put in for academics. That's why.
Yeah, probably true. But you could say that it's co-curricular. It's part of the academic thing. But
You get around it by saying that, yeah. My kid's struggling socially
and kids
at
are
this
supposed
school.
to move now. I wonder if all these kids move.
So yeah, we've been the beneficiary, kids coming in because you have a good program.
Yeah, right.
But there is, I think what you're referring to is the recruitment piece, and I've got a specific story where we've had a player, Ethan Raggi is mentioned, by an opposing coach, maybe figure out who it is, that handed him a brochure, here are our summer workouts, here are all the Division I players that we've had, handed it to him after we lost a playoff game on the way to the bus. He was going to be a junior the next year.
Wow.
So that specifically happened, and we've still got the evidence and data, and
Really?
if we wanted to do something, but that happened. There's more to that story. But two stories that should be told is one with Jeff Evans, and I hope you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but when you had Aldrich, and I believe it was Al Nolan, that was going to, said he wanted to come play with Aldrich. And I believe that Jeff, and Jeff of course is so humble he would never say this, but said, you can come here, but you'll never play, because he's going to play his Jefferson kids. And they clearly would have won the state championship
Yes.
if that had
Because
happened.
they were already a state tournament team.
Yes, and he said, you can come, but I will not play you.
That was 07.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's where Jeff, goes to the top of the rung
Right.
for what modeling for all of us. And I'm sure, and I think, amongst coaches that do the right thing, I think we would make a phone call and say, and it happened we had Miles Hansen, if you remember him from, Ross Travis from Chaska.
Oh.
He was going to come to Eden Prairie. His dad called me, and I didn't know who he was. He was a ninth grader, and I called Dana and said, this parent called me, want to let you know. And he promised me he'd start on varsity as a ninth grader, and they stayed at Chaska, so that worked out. That's actually true.
But he tried, maybe he wouldn't have.
Which is maybe pretty smart.
Yeah.
But then, that was our 2011 team. And I always thought about that. Had we had him, we maybe would have beat Hopkins that year.
Yeah.
But to me, there would have been a big asterisk, right? I would have felt like it's not our guys, we got this, and it would have felt different, frankly.
John, any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the big deal is, in defense of some of these schools, I'm sure that they say, well, we don't recruit them. I think Greg's right. I think that the program just, hey, we're so good. You know that if you're going to go to this place, you are going to be in the state tournament, basically, and you're going to be very successful. So I think that people see that, and then they just think, well, I can be the next kid to do that same thing. My biggest problem really is situations where kids transfer and then, they never move. You know what I mean? Like, I know they don't move because they live in my town. You know what I mean? Like,
So they're not
there's
following
no
the
question.
rules, yeah.
That's not even legal. You know what I mean? You never moved. And I know you didn't move because you live right next to
see you
some
mowing
of my
the lawn.
players.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, that kind of thing, that is where it gets a little, it's like, come on. What's going on? And nobody really wants to, like we at Lakeville North, we're not like, wow, we're going to turn them in or whatever. So then we don't say anything. And then they're obviously not going to say anything because they don't mind winning some games. And, so it's just kind of a weird situation where I think it gets out there that, hey, you don't even have to move. You just do it this way and you can circumvent the rules and you'll be eligible and you never have to move, And that seems like that's defeating the spirit of the rule.
Interesting dynamic with what you mentioned is you have to recruit your own players. Like in 8th grade, you have to make sure they're coming to your school, and you have to get to know them, and you have to, even in high school, you don't want to kowtow to them and promise them that they're going to play, but you want to develop a relationship and have it be a program that they think is worth playing on because, we're living in an area in the West Metro where it's not a very far drive if you got a real good player to go to some of these schools where they welcome them, so recruiting your own players became a thing like in the early 2000s, I think.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
What percentage of, I got into a debate with this guy during the state tournament a couple months ago, and he said, this guy used to play for one of the Metro teams here. He's younger than me, but he's like, we were talking about recruiting, and he said, 90% of high school coaches are recruit on some level. And I said, you are on drugs. You have no idea.
10%.
You have no idea. So that's what I'm going to ask you guys. What percentage of coaches are
5%.
recruiting? What would you say, just to throw a number, a percentage off the top of your head?
I would say 3 or 4 schools.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, right.
Well, then that's
Really? So you're talking 1%.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's hardly any.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's true.
That's what I would say.
Steve, what do you think?
I've been out of it a little bit, but in talking to these guys, AEU has played a part in the recruiting, I think, but there's not a lot. I don't know. Coaches I know don't go out and actively. That I know well don't go out actively recruiting people.
Yeah, I
And that's the
think
whole
it's
story. How they arrive at these schools.
Right.
Do they transfer legitimately? Their parents move, or
What's interesting is you guys, some of these schools, we know who they are, is at the groundwork has been laid. So at this point,
They don't
kids
have to.
just, in fact,
Like you said.
if you ask some of these coaches, oh, are you recruiting? And say, recruiting, we're pushing kids away. And I would imagine that is the case at this point. But the small and subtle recruiting maneuvers have been done years ago, right? Or it's we push these 19 kids and their dads away, but the one 8th grader who's 6'9", we want you. So it still happens to a degree, but
Well, the argument that school uses when they say, we tell many kids no. Yeah, well, that means you tell some kids yes. So
and why can't these coaches like publicly say, don't come here, because you're going to take a job of a kid who's come through the program, spent the time, money, and effort to come through the youth program, play all on the traveling teams, to get cut as a sophomore or junior, or to make the team but never play. Why can't they say, just publicly say, stay out of here. I'm going to win or lose with the kids that have come through.
they could.
Try to reward.
Just choose not to.
Right?
We, Dave and I spoke out in an article against, because it was public, right? And against recruiting, and Hopkins was mentioned. We had to play Hopkins the next day after the article came out. It was not pretty.
Was it blowing up in their locker room?
So you guys,
They beat us like 110 to 70 or something, and they did not take the pedal off the metal. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. Comes out. I think it was the
next
morning.
day.
I think it was the morning that we played them on a Tuesday.
And they had it blowing up in their locker room.
They were not. He didn't talk to me for a couple of years after
I'm going
that.
to say all 7 of the recruits were really offended.
They weren't offended. The coach was.
Hey Kevin, in 2000, we lost a pretty prominent player here to one of the
Skoglund.
7-footer.
We really were determined at that point to take care of our own. And to get on what Greg was saying, I mean, we had to watch the 7th graders, the 8th graders, really build those relationships. And so our philosophy became, let's not worry about them, but let's take care of our own. And then we had Cole, and we were going through the same process with Cole. And I used to watch him from 7th. I'd go to all the games. And then I used to always say to him, hey, if you're that great, they're going to find you. You don't need to go somewhere else. They're going to find you.
Were they all over him? Cole?
Supposedly. And
Yeah.
there were phone calls apparently made those types of things.
Us?
But anyways, so Jeff always had the saying, I'd rather lose with my own than win with somebody else's. And that was been kind of our cornerstone.
And in reverse of that is if a kid wants to leave, I always thought like, well, if you don't think this is a good culture and a good program for you, then it's probably not. You're probably selfish, and you probably are a kid that we don't want. So, we were still good even when they left. Some good players, because basketball is such a team game. If you got a selfish player, it can just ruin your team. One guy. So I didn't feel bad if they left, to be honest.